Welcome back. Americans largely know Donald Trump for his real estate properties and as a reality TV star, but his business's connections with foreign governments are across the world. Just to name a few, Trump is developing luxury real estate in Saudi Arabia, Scotland, Azerbaijan, Uruguay. He has marketing deals in Turkey, the Philippines, the United Arab Emirates. The Bank of China is a lender to at least one of Trump's properties. The president-elect still has not released his tax returns, so could there be even more dealings that we're not aware of at this time? Joining us for more on how Trump could handle those conflicts of interest is Frank Alcock, professor of political science at New College of Florida, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Party. Boy, Rod, you heard all that. Does any of that concern you?
I mean, kind of. But I think that the problem we run into with this setup, with this arrangement, is that you have somebody that's spent his whole life building an extremely successful business empire. He's clearly been grooming his children to take over it. He hadn't handed off the reins yet. If he'd handed off the reins a few years ago, this conversation would be nothing now. So he's going to hand it off now, so now we're concerned that it's not going to be a blind trust enough, when it's probably similar now to what it would have been then. Not very blind at all. Yet he would have already accomplished that. So he's in a position where he ran for president without having had the handoff yet, which is sort of on him. On the other hand, I'm not sure that we want only people running for office, for president, who haven't really done anything in the private sector. So we had Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, for instance, who were politicians essentially their whole life, so they didn't have this issue at all. But I don't think we want to limit ourselves and our options for president to only people like that. I think having long-term successful businessmen like Trump, like Mitt Romney, those are good candidates and good people to have in the office. But the trade-off is you got to figure out how to handle their business dealings.
Well, what do you both make of some of the reporting over the last week or two where he talked to the president, I believe, of Argentina, and it was reported that he asked about what's the holdup with my hotel down there. In terms of the UK, he said to, was it Nigel Farage, he doesn't like the windmills that can be seen from his golf resort. That would seem to be, if true, direct conflicts.
I think there's a blurring of the lines. So if we just go back to the basics, the idea that somebody uses their role in public office for private gain at the expense of public good, that's what we're concerned about. And there are laws in place that explicitly forbid people in certain positions, certainly quid pro quos, we can't do that, and that'll get you thrown in jail. But there are certainly up front, there are certain restrictions that you have on officials holding certain roles where the decisions that they're making in public office are actually directly affecting their private entities. This is unprecedented in terms of having somebody with this vast amount of holdings that is now the president. Typically, you'd put your assets into a blind trust. That would be unprecedented for somebody like Trump, and I don't think he's going to do that. And so we're in a position right now where I think you're going to see the blurring of lines. Most everything that Trump will do as a president is going to affect the Trump empire and vice versa. So
here are two questions. Number one, I saw an interview with David Axelrod, who ran Obama's campaign today, who said that when he went to the White House with Obama in 2008, he owned two businesses and he had to sell them because he was told, divest yourself of them before you take a job in the White House. You heard Trump say this week that some legal advice that he's been told is that if the president can't legally have a conflict. So what do you both think of that?
I don't quite follow that. I'd have to know the explanation behind that sentence, because that doesn't make sense on the face of it to me. So I'd have to have the further explanation if a legal expert scholar actually told him that.
I'm not a legal expert scholar, but I think he's technically right in that most of the ethics laws that apply to the executive branch, the vice president and the president are excluded. There's something called legally,
yes.
And there's something called the emoluments clause in the Constitution, where the president legally cannot accept compensation from a foreign entity, which clearly Trump will be doing, but that can be waived by Congress, and there's some latitude in terms of interpretation. So will Trump get himself into trouble legally? Impeachment? It just depends upon what Congress decides, and right now I think they'll cut him a lot of slack. I think people are probably more concerned about his role as president. But this is going to dog him, certainly.
Right. There is much more to discuss. We are just getting started, but when we return, we'll have a check on our Thanksgiving weather forecast, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing how President-elect Donald Trump will strike a balance between his array of businesses and the White House. Our guests tonight include Frank Alcock, professor of political science at New College of Florida, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club. You know, there was this story about foreign diplomats trying to stay at Trump's new hotel in Washington because it might be good for the business that they are trying to do in Washington with the new administration. But the question becomes, do Americans even care? As Trump said in a tweet a few days ago, you all knew that I had these outside interests. Right?
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I think that really this is all baked into who Trump is and who people voted for. I don't think that anybody has a real concern about it. I think the people, the media, deep insiders like the Bush ethics guy, and Democrat operatives, that's the core group, I think, that probably is deeply concerned about these potential conflicts of interest. I think that the large demographic of voters in the country just don't care. They want to see what he's going to do as president, both those who hate him and those who like him. They want to see what he's going to do as president. This only becomes an issue if there becomes that sort of overt and obvious quid pro quo type of problem where it's known then, and that could happen if he's given back his Twitter account, maybe. Maybe that could happen, but otherwise, I just don't think anybody's going to care about it going forward.
You agree or disagree, Frank?
I'm close. I think the range of people that actually care up front might be a little bit broader, but certainly not enough to disrupt the presidency unless A, he does something incredibly dumb, or B, he doesn't deliver. I think that's what a lot of people. Is he going to use the presidency to benefit himself and his empire? Absolutely, I think so. Will people care? It really depends upon a lot of other factors.
Well, both comment about this. Let's say the economy explodes right now and we're doing really well, and he's doing really well. I don't think anybody would probably care. But
no. What
happens if the opposite happens and the economy stalls or does not improve? People's lives are not greatly improved, but you see that his business empire is growing and being very successful.
Well, then I think there would be some angst there probably. It might be able to be explained, not so much under a conflict of interest guise, but more under he's got a global empire. It might be doing well in Asia, it might be doing well in Europe or something. And so he might be doing okay with the Trump one while the American economy is not so great. But then, even then, I don't think it's going to be the Trump business is doing well. What people will be mad about is you're not delivering on the promises that you were going to make America great again and the economy going well. That's what he'll be held to account for, again, over and above the conflict of interest with Trump Company.
Right?
Yeah, I think there's an overwhelming number of people that believe that Main Street is going to benefit, and Wall Street will be contained. I don't see that happening. I don't know how long their patience is going to be. If he delivers for Main Street, then I don't think people really care, but I'm not sure that's going to happen, and so we'll just have to see.
Let's shift the conversation a little bit and talk about the situation here in Florida, because we have a part-time legislature, and many of the people who make up the legislature are lawyers, they're insurance agents, they come from a variety of different things, but you cannot make a living by being in the Florida legislature. I think it pays $29,000 a year, and the new Democratic leader in the state Senate even brought that up in an article today, and he basically said, do we want to be wealthy older guys who are so far along in their profession that they can take 6 months out of the year and come to Tallahassee for $29,000? What is wrong with a teacher being able to come here? What is wrong with somebody who spent most of their career as a bus driver coming up here? When you have so many lawyers and insurance agents, isn't there a direct conflict of interest when they're voting on issues that pertain to their day job? Rod?
Oh, well, okay. There could be. There certainly could be. I think as far as the pay and all, the solution to that is a more full-time legislature. Well, I'm not in favor of that, and I don't think Floridians largely would be in favor of that either. The whole concept of the way Florida is doing it is much more like the original founders, where it's sort of a service, a temporary time of civic duty. Where you go, you put in, you help your country, you help your state, then you go back to your businesses and all. I like that concept. I understand the potential for conflict of interest. I understand the potential that you're only getting, well, the people, I mean, I couldn't afford to be a legislator. I can't walk away from my company for 6 months. I don't know how some of them do it and keep it going and all. But as far as the conflict of interest, I think that the flip side of that is when you have people like that, if you have insurance agents, then they are experts in the field of insurance. They have a lot of knowledge about insurance, which if I were a legislator, I wouldn't have nearly that understanding of knowledge. And so you don't necessarily want to walk away from that.
Right, but if you, let's say, own an insurance company, you're probably going to be supportive of legislation that will help the insurance industry, not necessarily the consumer.
But you want to get reelected also. So there you have sort of both sides going.
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with Rod here. I think the way that we've set up the legislature, I would be in favor of a more full-time legislature. I think the legislature, the salaries and the rules, the way that they're set up, it's a small slice of America that could actually pull it off, even if they're successful in getting elected. So you're not going to see many teachers. It's almost impossible for a teacher or a bus driver to do what it takes to win a seat and sustain their lives and sustain their families on what you get. So what do we have now? What we have, it's a very narrow group of folks, and most of the folks in the legislature they're paid, they derive a stream of income from some source, and it's a narrow group of interests that essentially their power in the legislature pays off of the groups that fund them. And what you end up having is, again, it's the angst with everybody realizes that there are folks in power and they're paid to stay there by people that the rules benefit them at the expense of everybody else.
Frank?
So we have county commissioners who get paid $80,000 a year. It's a full-time job. I still don't see teachers and others doing that and that sort of thing. You still have the same types of people that are doing that. There's a point at which I think an awful lot of teachers that I know love teaching really are not interested in being in politics and that sort of. So I don't know that changes it. To me, Congress has been full-time and paid a ton of money, for a long time. I don't see that Congress operates any better than the Florida State Legislature. California Assembly, is a full-time sort of thing. I think California is a horribly run state, so I really don't think that is a problem.
Actually, they took a budget deficit out there. They now have a budget surplus, and they have an economy that is growing more than most countries.
Yeah, and there's a whole conversation on the temporary California bubble we could have.
Okay, but there have been allegations, at least here in Florida, with certain members of the Florida legislature that they have done things or voted for things that directly benefit the industry that they're involved with.
Well, couldn't that be the same thing? A teacher, if a teacher was up there, there'd certainly be legislation that could benefit teachers or any other professions that you might want to insert other than lawyers and insurance agents. There's always going to be that. We all have interests in our lives. So as legislators, that would always be the case. I think the key is that if you have a direct conflict of interest, you recuse yourself from a vote. But if it's not a direct one and a direct legal one, then you still have a responsibility to represent your constituents with a vote.
Right?
Yeah, I'm less concerned actually about representatives that hail from or work in certain sectors passing legislation that's sort of beneficial for. If that sector benefits at the expense of everybody else, then it's a problem. But that doesn't bother me. It's the same thing. I agree with the education point. I would just like to make the salaries and the legislature work, that we could just get a broad spectrum of folks that represent all of us up in the legislature. We don't have that right now. So.
Back to the issue about blind trusts and whether it's even reasonable for people, whether, I don't know, if you're the governor of Florida, and I know that Rick Scott has been confronted with the same situation involving putting his assets in a blind trust, or whether it's a Donald Trump, should a governor or a president have to pay a personal price for being the chief executive officer of their state? One has to remember that Jimmy Carter, when he was elected, put his assets in the blind trust, and he found out when he left the presidency he was bankrupt. So, I mean,
who did he hire? I'm sure they did.
But the question is, and we have less than a minute, whether this is even a reasonable thing to be thinking that any president could do.
No, I'm in a sense I don't think so, because I think that they have a responsibility for their companies and all. And if you take the Trump situation and his investments in 500 companies, and it's his brand name, to actually liquidate put it in a blind trust like that, sell off things, make a public company, put it in a blind trust, would decimate the company that he's built a lifetime building.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll get final thoughts from our guests, plus find out what some of our viewers are saying about our story last night. Welcome back. On January 20th, Donald Trump will become president of the United States, but how will his businesses handle his international business ties in office? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. In the end, Frank, are you concerned about the potential conflicts of interest that we've been hearing about over the last few days?
I'm extremely concerned. I do not think that he will run afoul and put himself in legal jeopardy. It will come back to the disposition of Congress. And so I think going forward, I do not expect him to liquidate his assets and put it in a blind trust. He's indicated that his children will largely be running his operation. They will also be involved in a number of foreign meetings, and the lines will be blurred between the Trump private business empire and the Trump presidency. I think going forward for the country, I think greater push for transparency and constant scrutiny. That's what's in order, and we're just going to have to trust the public to just know as much as they can about the decisions that he's making, whether he's trying to benefit himself and his empire at the expense of everybody else or not. And it'll just come back to, I think, political questions rather than legal questions.
I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about the transition now. The people that he puts in place. I'm concerned about how well he will do as president of the United States. I'm not concerned about the conflict of interest stuff because there are much, much bigger issues to me as an American, and I think to the American people. And so I am not concerned that it's going to be a problem for him. I'm encouraged by the transition so far, by how well it's been handled, by the fact that he's delegated a lot to competent people. This is exactly what I wanted to see.
And you don't believe that decisions may be modified based upon concerns about whether his company has notes that are held by China or Russia or anything else?
Right now, no. Could that change? Yes. But right now, no, I'm not, because I'm thinking that his legacy in his mind now is far more about how successful president he is.
Okay. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about one of Trump's campaign pledges. During a meeting with the New York Times yesterday, the president-elect told reporters he is backing off his plans to pursue charges against Democratic rival Hillary Clinton. Here is what some of you are saying about that decision. Ed Guman writes, I think Trump needs to keep his word. That's why the people voted for him, to do what you say you're going to do and say what you're going to do to people and hold them accountable. Donald Trump, please prosecute like you said that you were going to. And Ian Eldridge writes, I love that people actually thought Trump would try to throw one of his good friends in jail, just like he is draining the swamp. Joke's on you, suckers. And Jill Moore writes, he doesn't have a choice. There is nothing to charge. Plus, it's not up to him. He is not a dictator, nor will we allow him to be. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And want to watch our past roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. I want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Frank Alcock is a professor of political science at New College of Florida, and Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club.